Everybody, and welcome to another Sunday Talk within the Nine-Sided Circle. I'm one of your hosts, Nora Kyle, along with
the other one of your hosts, Mushtaq Ali.
Yeah, so thanks for joining us. We have a lot of cool people sitting in with us tonight, and I'm sure we'll have a lot more cool people watching this on the replay when it gets posted on YouTube. So welcome to all of you. It's so nice to have some new faces, names we've seen in comments, but finally get to meet in person. So welcome. And there's another person joining us. Cool. And do you want to give our YouTube spiel, Mushtaq?
All right. So here's the YouTube spiel. Hi, if you're watching this on YouTube, welcome. And we would be ever so delighted if you would consider looking down over here probably and pushing that subscribe button if you're not already a member, because then you, if you hit the bell, will know every time we upload a video, which is at least once a week. And you're eligible for winning amazing prizes. Believe it or not, there can be amazing prizes. So join us, join our channel. We will be happy to have you. And it's going to be a fun one tonight. There will be more math than usual, but you'll endure.
Yep. So with all that said, like, comment, subscribe, the thing.
Yeah.
Just let us
We
know.
love your comments. Even if you want to hate on us, we don't mind. So hit the like button, hit the hate button, say something. As long as you're not trolling, we'll answer your comments.
So there you go. And this evening, we are going to, kind of as a follow-up to our last week discussion of the Enneagram of the Hero's Journey, we're going back to basics tonight. We're going to be talking about the Enneagram of Process itself from the bottom up.
Yep.
Yes. And this should make it easier to follow the content in that video if you felt a little bit lost. So that's what we're hoping for. Hopefully it'll be a good introduction to the content and that you'll find it useful, because the Enneagram of Process is a very powerful tool. It's a map, and we need to keep that in mind when we apply it, because as with any map, it does not necessarily perfectly match the territory, but it's one of the best ones you're going to find out there. And that's why we want to share it with you. So why don't you get us started, Mushtaq?
Yeah, we realized after we did last week's video that we probably should have done this one first. We're kind of spontaneous with these things sometimes, so it's like, oh, let's talk about the Enneagram of the Hero's Journey because somebody mentioned the Hero's Journey and that will be fun. And then we go, oh, some of these people have not been hanging out with us for the last 2 years and they don't know what the hell we're talking about. So we're backtracking to do this, and this is the original Enneagram. This does not have anything to do with personality typing. It doesn't have to do with what number you are or anything like that. This has to do with the process, any process that you start, and how it can change through time to its completion. And the value of this way of using the Enneagram is that you can have some forewarning of when things are going to hit the proverbial spinning blades, and do the things that need to be done to keep that from impacting you and breaking your process. So today we're going to do the basics of it, and then probably next Sunday we're going to do the Enneagram of the work, which is the one that's exciting to me. More about that later. But we're going to start you from the beginning and teach you great and incredible mysteries in an hour approximately. So, do you want to start us, Nora, or shall I?
Yeah, why don't you just, get the ball rolling, and I'm sure I will have stuff to talk about too myself.
Okay. Well, the Enneagram, as we see it now, there it is over my shoulder here. See that? That Enneagram has been around since the turn of the 20th century. Before then, I have found no references to this particular way of looking at the diagram. Before it showed up like this, it was still existent. And we may do a video on this at some time too. It was what we call now the Pythagorean Enneagram, because we can trace this back to the time of Pythagoras and demonstrate that they are the same thing. Likely it goes back much, much, much further, but we move from the area of history into the area of mythology. So I've talked about this before. If you look at the playlist for the Enneagram, you'll find a couple of videos that we did some months ago that will touch on some of that stuff. But that's all mythology. We can't back it up with documents and such at this point. We can only infer and listen to stories that have been told us and take everything with a small grain of salt, or a small salt shaker, or a small Siberian salt mine, whichever you prefer. But it's useful to know the mythology as well as the history. But historically, we can place it around the time of Pythagoras in his mystery school, the semicircle, which is something like, what, 2,400 years ago, something like that, 2,300 years ago. I'd have to look up the exact dates, but over 2,000 years ago. And so we know that it's at least that old. And let's pull this up. So share a screen. Okay, I'm going to share this, and then I'm going to move this forward to here.
There, yeah.
This is...
Make sure everyone can see that. If you can see it, give a little wave in the...
Yeah, it takes a moment for it to load. Now, this is the basic Enneagram symbol that we see here. It will be different somewhat in different places. Most of the time you won't see the B in the center. Sometimes you'll see the outer circle being an Ouroboros, which is the serpent swallowing its tail. Sometimes it won't show the circle at all. It's usually not colored because people lived in black and white before mid 20th century. So what can you do? Anyway, this consists of 4 elements. The first element is the circle around here. This represents linear time, step by step. The second element, it represents the law of 3, and that is this triangle here. We're going to talk about the 2 laws that are involved a bit more. Then you have these moving lines. These are called the moving lines, and they represent the inner workings of the process, or inner viewing of the process. Then we have this dotted line down the center, and that is the equator of the Enneagram, the hidden 10th point. And that's important to the process. And then lastly, we have the B in the center. And the B represents the person who is an initiate and can stand in the center of the Enneagram and look around all of the basic lines. Now, the Enneagram is made up of 2 so-called laws: the law of 3-foldness and the law of 7-foldness. We know that people have been playing with these 2 for a very, very long time. And they are, if you know about Pythagoras, you know that he considered that all truth was at its basis mathematical in nature, and that to understand the universe, you had to break it down to the basic math.
Crap. I gotta unmute myself. So we will see that this is relevant because ultimately this symbol serves as a pre-electronic calculator for determining how to manage outcomes, how to plan a process, how to reach a goal through a well-outlined set of step-by-step intentional movements forward. Yep. So carry it away, Mushtaq. Tell us more about that.
Thank you. So the law of three, Pythagoras, his school experimented with putting numbers through hoops. And one of the important things that they would do is they would divide a particular number into one. Not one into a particular number, but a number into one. So let me go back. Here's the law of three written out mathematically. If you divide 3 into 1, you get 0.33333 on into infinity, a reoccurring decimal. Not an irrational number, but a reoccurring number. It just, if you programmed a computer to factor this out to its final degree, it would just keep churning out threes.
Right. And just to be clear, this is dividing 1 by 3.
Yes,
So,
1 by 3.
Yep.
Did I do that backwards?
A little bit.
So.
All good.
All
Just want to
good.
make sure people who
Yeah.
aren't looking at the visual are able to follow. Yeah.
So when you take this 333 into infinity and add it to itself, you get 0.66666 into infinity. And when you add another 33333 to it, you get 0.99999 into infinity. And this is one of the things that the Pythagoreans found interesting, is like, you would think that if you add 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3, you would get 1. But when you do it as a decimal, what you get is 99999. There's a little bit of the number missing. A little bit of that 1 has somehow gotten shaved off somewhere. And that told them, this is important somehow. Now, the law of three represents the first 3 forces that manifest in the universe. The manifestation of the divine, the 1, into the universe is not 1 into 2, because the moment you get the 2, you get a third. And those 3 forces are called by Mr. Gurdjieff, the holy affirming, the holy reconciling, and the holy denying. And those are the basic building blocks of the universe. The way I always like to talk about it is from the viewpoint of atomic structure. You have the Big Bang, the universe is created. All is light. The first thing that forms in the universe as an actual element, as matter, is hydrogen. Hydrogen consists of 1 proton being having 1 electron spinning about it. Now, without the reconciling force, the universe cannot get more complex than that. Anybody understand why? Don't all talk at once. Why is it that that is as complex as it can get? I'm not wanting anything esoteric. I want physics. Now remember, the proton at the center of the atom, it has a positive charge, and the electron spinning about it has a negative charge.
What do we know about
positive and negative charges?
Yeah, what do we know about that? And
some basic stuff about
happens-
positive and negative charges.
Yeah, they repel each other.
Yes. 2 positive or 2 negative charges will repel each other. Positive charge and negative charge will attract each other. So the hydrogen atom is in perfect balance, ideally, because the spin of the electron pulls it away from the nucleus of the atom, from the proton, at the exact right proportions to keep everything spinning around. So the electron does not go flying off into space, nor does it get pulled into the nucleus to collapse. But in order to make anything more complex, you have to add more protons and more electrons. Now, the electrons are not a big problem because of the spin that they're doing, but the protons have to sit together in the nucleus. And what happens if you put 2 protons together?
They repel each other.
That's right. They go flying off away from each other as fast as they can. So this is where the third force happens, which in atoms is called a neutron. A neutron provides a neutral charge, a reconciling charge, as it were, that allows the 2 protons to inhabit near space without going flying off. So the next atom up from helium, or from hydrogen, is helium. Helium consists of 2 protons, 2 neutrons, and 2 electrons, spinning about each other very happily, and nothing goes blasting into the universe or collapsing in on itself. The actuality is much more complex than this, I am sure, and but this is the basic elementary school description of it that even somebody like me can understand. So that is the idea of the 3 forces. That in order for the universe to propagate, there has to be that third force. And so the universe doesn't go 1, 2, it goes 1, 2, 3. So from 1 to 3, from 3 to 6, from 6 to 12, from 12 to 24, from 24 to 48, from 48 to 96, and then everything falls to shit. So we don't have to worry about that. So the ancients looked at this and went, I wonder what happened to that last tiny bit of what would have made this 1 again. Why isn't it there? And they thought about it. And I'm not going to tell you the answer yet, but I want you to think about it. You might find a different answer than me, who knows? So that's the law of 3 in a nutshell. And that's the triangle in the Enneagram. Now, the law of 7, or the law of the octave, is equally interesting. 7 divided by 1, or 1 divided by 7. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. Comes up with the number 0.142857. Off into infinity. This is again a repeating decimal. That 142857 just goes everywhere. Now again, doing a process just like the other one, you can do this other ways, but I don't want to get into all of the mathematical tricks you can do with these 2 things. It would take up the entire hour and then some, and we have much more interesting things to talk about. If I add 142857 to 142857, I get 285714. And you notice that there are no 3s, 6s, or 9s in any of these. I keep adding them together. I add that last sum to 142857, and I get 42851571. I add that to another 142857, and I get 571428. I add another one, and I get 714285. And then I add another one, and I get 857142. And with the final one, I get 0.99999 into infinity again. All of these are reoccurring decimals that have no end.
Yes. So this is what occurs when you basically add 0.14 to 857 again and again 7 times. You end up with 0.999999. And again, we see that same thing happening just like with the 0.33 3 times. So it's a very interesting pattern to have emerge.
Yeah,
Where
it
we're
made the
not
ancients
quite
go,
adding up to 1.
What's up? And so we take this, and there's other ways to derive this. One day I may do something on ancient mathematics in the Enneagram because it's pretty groovy shit. But for what we have here, 142857 is the moving lines.
And Sherry asked if we had a typo in that last slide on the second line, because it says 0.26. Yes.
Probably.
Yeah. Don't worry about that typo. Yep. It should be an 8 instead of a 6. Thanks for that, Sherry.
Yeah, that's me typing fast because we had a bunch of things get in the way of this today. So ignore that extraneous 6.
Sherry says, I love patterns. Yay. Good. This talk is for you then, Sherry. There we go.
So we get here. We have the 333, 666, 999. Here we have the 142857. And here we have 3, 6, and 9. There's your law of 3. Now we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 here. And that gives us 1, and the moving line goes forward 1, 4, 2, 8, 5, 7, 1. There's your moving line. I didn't put numbers in on this. I probably should have, but this is more fun because it keeps you on your toes. Got to remember what I'm talking about. So you have sequential numbers around the circle. You have this weird connection on the law of 3 in the triangle, and then you have the moving lines going that 7 pattern of 1, 4, 2, 8, 5, 7, 1. And it all comes back to the 9. The 9 is important because the 9 actually represents both 0 and 9. Any computer programmer will tell you that you don't start numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You start numbers 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, because 0 is incredibly important.
And as you can see, that's where the beginning of the process starts, and it's where the closing of the process ends up as well. So it's both a beginning and an end, 0 and 9.
Yep. Does this all make sense so far? Sense in the sense that I have clearly enough explained the little arithmetic problems so that you aren't going, what the hell is he talking about?
Yeah, if you have any questions thus far, you can.
Yeah, I'm going to stop the share so we can actually see each other.
There we go. Thank you. Yeah. So how is everyone doing with this so far? If you're following, why don't you give me, thumbs up. Good. And if you have any questions, feel free to chime in. You can unmute or type it in.
Yeah. We prefer unmuting because then everybody can hear you talk.
Yep. All right. Seems like everybody's doing okay so far. Good. Okay. I'm sure people will have more questions later on, so why don't we
let us proceed then.
Yeah.
So the thing about the law of 7, also known as the law of the octave, is that it is ubiquitous in the universe. The law of the octave says that in the universe, things arrange themselves naturally into octaves. An octave is do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do. I use the old solfeggio. Some people say ti, do now. I didn't learn it that way, and I refuse to change because I am old and stuck in my ways. And there's an interesting thing about the musical octave, which is also found everywhere else. If you look at the musical octave, say you start at C, the key of C. We use that because you can see it on the piano very easily. If you look on the piano, starting with the note C, you see that it's all the white keys. And all of the white keys, except for two of them, have a black key in between them. The black key is the half step. But there is no half step between the mi, fa, and the si, do interval. So you go do, re, mi, and there's two black keys in between the do, in between the re and the mi. And then mi and fa is a half step instead of a whole step. Then sol, la, si, there are half steps in between each of them. And from si, do, it is just a half step between those two notes. Now, I didn't bother to write all of this out mathematically or proportionally. The way we determine this is by listening to the harmonics of a note. If I pluck a string, I'm not just getting the tonic. The tonic is the basic up, down, sound of the note. I'm getting all of the harmonics of that tonic note hidden within there. So if I pluck a string and it goes bah, and I touch the string in the middle, you will hear the octave. The octave is the first harmonic of the note. So from do to do is the first harmonic. The next harmonic is called the perfect fifth. So, and that's the note sol. And then the next harmonic is the major third. So 1, 3, 5 is a major chord. And the thing is, we understand this octave at a cellular level. And the example I like to use is I asked Noor to please sing the octave, but don't add the last do to it until you can't stand it anymore.
You want me to give it a try?
Give it a try. I know you're a little bit froggy today, but
Yeah.
you can do it.
Okay, so do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti. And then there's this expectation that there will be do at the end.
Yeah. And each of those notes feels right to people. Now, yes, there's lots and lots of other keys that you can sing in that use all sorts of, flats and sharps and all of that, and even semitones, quarter tones. But they all resolve around these 7 tones, no matter what. And that includes, the Western 12-note scale, the Persian 24-note scale, the Chinese 5-note scale. They all follow this octave. No matter what, you can hear it in all of the music everywhere. We found a video of a guy from the Solomon Islands who was playing hollow bamboo tubes being clunked on a rock. And you could hear the same octave that everybody else on the planet uses. He didn't use any kind of weird one. And it was beautiful music, and it felt beautiful, even though we were no part of his culture. So we look at that and we go, okay, what is it about these two intervals of the half step that makes, Ilmar says Indian ragas, Schoenberg, all of it, Harry Parch, everything. No matter what they do, you find the fundamental octave in their music. Ragas use amazing semitones and some of even eighth tones, but they still resolve around these steps. So we look at the octave and we say that the vibration retards at the mi fa and the si do intervals. So rather than going the full step, it comes in at the half step, and it needs extra energy to resolve to the next note. Now this is where we go from music theory into metaphor. So again, I am going to pull up the Enneagram. Here is the first, what we call the shock point, the retardation of the octave at 3. The real first is up here at do, because it starts it. The second resolution of the octave is here at 6, and that requires energy to come through. And what we say is that the energy has to come from somewhere. And the universe itself may or may not be a closed system. We don't know. But from our tiny part of the universe, we live in an open system, which means that energy can come in from outside to get us past the octave. So this is the mi to fa interval here. So you have do, re, mi, fa, sol. So to get past this mi to the sol, something has to be added. La, si, and something else has to be added. Then it resolves back to the do again, but the moving line has another implication. Make sense so far? Probably not so much. We have a way of teaching this that actually gives you something that makes sense. That's the next Enneagram. This is the Enneagram of the kitchen. This is the first Enneagram that most people learn. I learned it originally from J.G. Bennett many, many years ago. And it makes sense, so we use it. So we're going to go over how this works. The 0-9 point, the first do and the last do, is going to be the idea of sustaining the community through food. Point 1 here is what we call the kitchen ready for work. By the way, I should mention that this is a preparation point. This is an action point. This is a shock point. This is a preparation point. This is an action point. This is a shock point. This is a preparation point. This is an action point, and this is a shock point. So, preparation, the kitchen is ready for work. That means The kitchen is clean. All of the equipment in it is in its proper place and easily accessed. Kitchen at work means the chef has come in, the sous chefs are in, the kitchen helpers are in, and they start pulling out the things that they're going to need for the meal. Pots, pans, knives, cutting boards, all of that are being pulled out. Now, the first shock is down here. And in this case, that's the food has to enter into this equation. If you have no food, you have no meal. The food comes in from another process that meets this process at point 3. And it must be the correct food. If you were planning on making a pot roast for everybody, and what you have is a huge pile of shrimp, your process is going to break down. So the food must enter, and it must be the correct quality of food for what you're doing. When the food enters, you move to point 4, which is prepping the food. Prepping the food means you're cutting, you're dicing, you're seasoning, you're doing all of these things here at point 4. But you have made quantitative changes in the food, but not any qualitative changes to speak of yet. That happens at the shift from 4 to 5. Here is the equator, and this is the point of no return. Once you apply heat to the food, which starts here, unrecoverable changes happen to the food. Once the food is cooking, you can't uncook the food. You can't go back from this point. Here, on point 5, the food is cooking. Changes are happening. Heat is being applied.
Yes, and as one thing you've mentioned in the past as well is that it's kind of like there's a continuum between one point and the next.
Yes, there is a continuum between one point and the next.
Yeah.
It's not jumping from number to number, it's gliding from number to number around the circle. So there's all of these little things that are happening. So imagine if you have a guitar and you hit a note and then you slide your finger up the string, especially if it's a fretless guitar, you hear the entirety of every nuance between one note and the next. And that's kind of what's happening here. Fretless guitar, cello, violin, trombone, you can just slide on up. So food is cooking here. When the food is perfectly ready to be served, not too soon, not too late, you get to your next shock. The community must enter. Otherwise, you don't have a meal. Without the community, there is no meal. So if the community enters, you can move on to point 7 and serve the food. If the community is not there, you're left with pots of overcooked stuff. So we're going to assume that the community enters. At point 7, you have food is served. This is an incredibly important point because how you serve the food has to do with how the meal is enjoyed. If you just slop everything in a pile on a plate and shove it in front of somebody, this is not an enjoyable experience. The food must be plated correctly. And there's an art to it. There is as much art to plating the food as cooking the food. Because you eat first with your eyes and then with your nose before you eat with your mouth. You see the food and it looks appetizing to you. You smell the smells and the aromas join together harmoniously. And that starts the digestive juices flowing. So if you do that right, the process moves to 8. But the kitchen goes from 7 back to 1 along this line here. The kitchen is done at this point when the food is served. So the kitchen needs to return to the kitchen ready for work. Things must be washed, put away, put back up. The first time I taught this publicly, we had a guy who was a chef for an entire school district, and he was looking at this going, yeah, this is exactly how the kitchen works. So the kitchen process goes back from 7 to 1, but then the food is eaten and consumed by the community, and that gets us back to the last dough here, and that is the community is sustained, is nourished.
Yep. So this is the point where, you know, the guests leave, they go off and digest their food, and they're actually moving into their next Enneagram, which is
the Enneagram of digestion.
Exactly.
Or the Enneagram
yes.
of indigestion, depending on how good the meal was.
Right. So this is a spiral process.
Yeah.
It's a spiral upward into the next Enneagram.
Yeah. Each of these points should be seen as touching against a triangle point on 3 other Enneagrams.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point when I'm more ambitious, I can draw out several examples of that. And, you know, see how the process of growing food over here, and the process of having a community over here, and the process of nourishment up here.
Yeah, having a kitchen even, having a kitchen that can be ready to work.
Yep. So this is an easy to understand process, but it is our contention that if you are clever enough, you can take any process at all, and lay it out on an Enneagram, and it will show you where the shock points are. And if you know where the shock points are, then you know how to alter your behavior in such a way that you get through the shock points, which gets us to the next part of this. And that's the little guy here in the center. This is the chef. The chef is monitoring the sequential progression, but at the same time, he's looking at the moving lines. And the moving lines are telling him something. So here, he looks up at 1, and 1 goes down to 4 and back to 7. So as the kitchen is ready for work, he looks down to prepping the food, and he can say, what am I going to need to successfully prep this food? And he pulls out the right tools instead of the wrong ones. He looks back to 7 and he goes, what do I need to plate this meal correctly? And he pulls out the right dishes, the right silverware, all of this kind of stuff. When the process moves to 2, again, he looks at the moving lines, and he looks still down to 4, prepping the food, and back to 8, the food is eaten. So he can say, how do I prepare this food so that my community is willing to eat this? He gets through the shock point. 4 gives you 1 and 2, and for tonight, we can basically ignore those lines, though they are important. I want to save some stuff up my sleeve so that I can amaze you with my wisdom later. And then we move to 5. 5, you look up, food is cooking, you look up to serving the food and eating the food. 5 tells you how long, at what temperature, and under what mediums you must cook the food. Because the food must be served in an elegant manner and be in a form that is palatable and nourishing. And that happens during the cooking process. When you get up here to 7, food is served. And the kitchen looks forward to the kitchen ready for work. And it looks back to the cooking. If the cooking is correct, the food can be served, and then the kitchen can return to its preparation state of being ready to work. And this is the real value of the Enneagram. The stuff around the outside of the circle is great, but these 6 points and these lines that connect them tell you how any given process is going to work and where the potential downfalls can be. There are potential downfalls at all of them, but the biggies, the ones that require energy from the outside, happen at 3 and 6 and 9.
So what can you tell us about 3, 6, and 9, Mushtaq? Or rather, first of all, how's everyone doing in terms of following? I know many of you had previous experience with the Enneagram, but I just want to open the floor to questions.
Yes, let's have a few questions and then I will pontificate some more.
Palon, how are you doing? Good. Thumbs up. Yay. Nancy, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I didn't finish listening to last week's until just today, so this is a little repetitious for me, but you know, it's all right.
Yep.
One thing I'm wondering about is the musical octave just has 2 shock points.
Yes.
And this has 3, so it seems rather different.
It's not, because you can think of the first, the 9 shock as the tonic note and the 6 shock as the octave. The mi-fa interval, or the si-do interval. So the first shock is always the tonic. So you have the tonic and the 2 half steps.
So one gets you started, the other 2 get you through.
Yes.
And I pulled up my piano so that people can have a visual. This is the tonic, that's where you get started. Here's that first interval, the 3 shock. And here's the second one leading you back to the beginning again. So I hope you all can see that. Yep.
Yeah, that brings it into focus.
Good.
When you hold it up closer, but
yeah, let's see if I can do that a little bit better. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so you can see it's C all the way up to C again over here on the right.
And if you notice, behind the first C is a half step interval.
Yep.
Which tells you that you're dealing with a shock point there as well.
And you're also thinking about one Enneagram leading into the next.
Yes.
As well. Yep. So hopefully that helps. I wanted to show it sooner, but I feel like this is a good opportunity to demonstrate that with a visual. Yep. Thanks, Nancy. All right, so where were we talking about those pointy parts? The
Yes.
triangle.
We are at confusing everybody. Jonathan, how are you doing? Talk to us. Enlighten us.
He says thumbs up, but yeah, feel free to chime in though.
Yes, so if someone was to insert the 2 extra black keys in, they would sound all wrong.
It would sound super wrong. I can't even demonstrate it to you
Yeah.
because we don't have that.
Yeah, if I had my saws here, I could show you what it sounds like because I can do the quarter tones on it, but it sounds uncomfortable to the ear.
I wish I could do it vocally, but I think that would take me some time because I would have to figure it out. It would be very strange.
Yeah, you're beginning to get into quarter tones, and that's a whole different animal.
Yep.
But we don't need to be, from what you're saying, this is not something we need to be taught as children.
No.
We are born knowing how to appreciate, we all agree that what the notes sound right as they are.
Yeah, pretty much in my experience, not only do all humans get this, but most higher animals get this too.
Yeah.
I mean, my cat was a total critic if I hit a wrong note when I was practicing. He would like give me dirty looks and stuff.
That means something higher than us has
Yeah.
created this.
Or it means that it's something that is built into the fabric of the universe at some level. To wax mystical for a moment. And once you understand this principle as a musician, you understand where to break the rules. And that's why you can get things like incredibly complex ragas with, you know, semitones and demi-semitones even. That means that sometimes you're playing not just in quarter steps, but in eighth steps. And yet it will all resolve around these seven in some way or another, even if you're adding a flat here and a sharp there to create different scales. So major scale is do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do. And a minor scale is do, re, mi, flat, fa, sol, la, si, do. Flatted third. And the minor scale sounds sad to everybody all over the world, regardless of culture. If you hear something played in a minor scale, you know that it's talking about something to do with sadness, whereas a major scale talks about happiness. And this was the basis of the idea of the Greek modes, which are very, very interesting, though way too complex to talk about at the moment. You had the modes, which are basically taking this same interval, this do, re, mi interval, and starting at a different note and finishing back on it. And each of those gives you a different mode, which gives you your major and minor scales, your seventh scales, and all of this kind of stuff. And was the basic of music for thousands of years. Before we could have instruments that were conveniently built with the halftones in. Zainab has to take off. Farewell, Zainab. So does this sort of make sense with the idea of here's how a process works, and that you can fit any process in this if you understand how it works and you're clever enough? And you can do the process of putting on your shoes. You can do the process of world domination and anything in between. And it will map out on this, and it will tell you where the two major failing points happen. Now, this is important because, and this gets back to that strange 999 part. If you start a process and it fails, you lose energy. You gain entropy. And that means the next time you try and do this process, it is incrementally harder. It's like you start pushing your car and you get tired and you stop. And while you stop, somebody loads 400 pounds into your car. And so the next time you push it, you have to expend more energy to get the process of pushing your car going again. And when you get tired and you stop, they add another 400 pounds. So now you got 800 pounds in there. Same basic idea. If you crash your process, you lose energy. Now, if you listen to our talk about the energy necessary for change, you know why this is important. Because you want to conserve as much energy as possible so that it is there for your work. And that's why you want to complete the process as you start, because if you do, yes, you expend energy in the work itself. Then that missing fraction that makes it one is taken by what Mr. Gurdjieff called the reciprocal maintenance of the universe. We pay the toll for our existence by giving the energy to the universe. But then there's the last little bit left, and that we get to keep. So we can actually accumulate energy through the conscious intention to finish a process, which means a couple of things. One, you be very careful on what you intend to do, and then you be very careful that you make sure that you do it. And this helps you with both of those. So any process, the first question should be, what is my intention for this process? Say, for instance, you want a new job. What is your intention for that new job? Do you want more money? Do you want better work experience? Do you want a better working environment? Do you want power and prestige? Why? Why would you want that new job? Because that is your entering shock. Then you have to craft your steps in such a way that that's what you end up with.
So something triggers you to want to make a change, of course. And once you decide on what that change could be, should be, I hate using the word should, but you know what I mean in this context. Whatever seems like a solution that would satisfy that motivation, you set that as your goal and you work towards that with intention. And as we know, we come up with challenges in following through with those intentions, which is why it's good to have maps like this laid out so that we can be prepared for those things to come up. And as we look forward and backwards to each of the steps involved, we can know what to expect. We can line our ducks up so that we're not shaken by those things quite as much. Same as with the chef in a kitchen, looking forward to the meal that needs to be prepared, the tools that are going to be necessary to create it, what's available, what can we select from what's available in order to create that meal, what kinds of processes are going to be involved in cooking the food and seasoning it and serving it in an aesthetically pleasing way. All of those steps mean that you're fully engaged. You're always thinking ahead and looking back. But what that means ultimately is that you've moved forward with your intention all the way through.
And it should be said that there is vastly more to this than we can cover in an hour. This is just the most superficial taste. Hopefully enough to wet your whistles and make you want more.
Yeah, because we didn't even get a chance to talk about those shock points as much as we would like to. Yep.
Yeah.
I had a question.
Yes,
if I
sure.
may. Let's say I wanted to create a song. It seems to me that I would be using not my thinking and so much, a simple song. I would be feeling using my heart to listen to the song and, oh, that's a pretty melody. I'm just going to tweak it here, tweak it there.
Yeah,
How could I use the Enneagram for
you
for
know,
that?
you could. And it's an interesting thing because, as Nora will tell you, I make up songs all the time.
Yep.
Yep. And they are very, very simple and very, very silly, but there is a process to it because it has to follow certain rules. The melody of the song has to be either pleasing or funny, maybe both if you're lucky. And the words have to follow the rhythmic structures of the melody and the rhyming structures of the language. And there are definitely shocks in there. I have actually, up until this moment, never thought about, when I do this, how I plot it on the Enneagram. Same with a poem or a story. I tell a lot of stories. Some of them are even true. But if I look back at them, they all fit on an Enneagram. But I don't think about the Enneagram in the moment. I intuit the places because I am in the flow of the thing when I'm doing it, as opposed to sitting down like my friend Stephen Barnes. When he does a story, he's very methodical as he plots things out, but he's a writer, so he has to be. I'm not a writer, so I can be as goofy as I want to be. But that's a really interesting point, and I'm going to have to think about that, because my sense is that yes, it will fit on an Enneagram, and it may be useful to map out a few of those that way before you go back to just doing it spontaneously. That's the old,
Maybe-
first there is a mountain, then there is no mountain, then there is.
Mm-hmm. A lot of this is pretty intuitive. I mean, because the chef is not literally sitting there plotting this out for himself or herself.
Yeah,
But
they're
still,
knowing intuitively, but they're
yeah.
knowing along the process.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And it's because they have internalized the process.
Maybe the better that it fits on the Enneagram, the less silly the song and the more profound the music.
Could be, unless you're going for silly, which I often am. Then the song is even more silly. Any more thoughts or questions?
Just that it might be worth working out in the Enneagrams for ordinary activities.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
This is for people within the school. You often get assignments from either Noor or myself. Make the Enneagram of this. Plot this on an Enneagram, then come back and show me.
Yep.
Dave does that a lot. Where is Dave? Dave, why aren't you here when I need you?
I think that's a very useful way of just kind of learning to intuit if one isn't, naturally attuned to these things, is to just plot it out. As with anything else, it's kind of like you get to witness it in front of you. And that certainly makes it easier to apply to bigger picture things that may carry a lot more weight for you. So then the Enneagram of washing the dishes can be extrapolated to the Enneagram of how to start a new business or go about starting a family, that kind of thing.
Yep. Or the process of complete awakening and non-dual consciousness.
Yeah, very important.
Which is what
Yes.
we're going to do next week, I think. I think we are going to do one more Enneagram before we move on to other things, and we're going to do the Enneagram of the work.
Yep.
Because if you see that Enneagram, you can know where the shit is going to hit the fan and how it's going to hit the fan, and oftentimes how you can avoid it. And it's probably one of the most important Enneagrams we've ever done.
Yep, so next week should be a very practically useful week, especially for this community. So I definitely look forward to having that conversation as well.
Yep. And one day we might do the Enneagram of separating the gold from the iron pyrite, which is also important.
Hey,
Okay,
Travis.
last questions.
Yeah,
Yes?
I saw you unmute yourself, Travis. Was that intentional? You got any thoughts?
It is. I have a thought. I guess the question of it is just kind of, am I on the right track? Kind of thinking of it this way. So if we are, in any of the Enneagrams, if you're stuck somewhere that's not a shock point, where you're not supposed to be stuck or need that influx of energy, is it fair to say that you're in the wrong process at that point?
Yeah, or you are breaking your process and cycling into one that's similar.
Okay.
We will see this very deeply in the Enneagram of the work, because a lot of people will cycle between 1 and 2, 1 and 2, 1 and 2, 1 and 2, and never get to 3.
Yeah.
Which is a really interesting thing. And it's another way to waste energy, but it is wasting it internally rather than having missed something coming in from the outside.
And many of us have been there. I
Yeah.
know I have. Yeah.
I've never been there.
No. No.
Did you believe me?
As much as we
No.
believe anything.
No, never believe anything I say.
Yeah. Thank you.
But that's a very good observation.
Any other thoughts or questions before we wrap up? All right, Palon's good. Shri, how are you doing?
Mostly good. It's just about how I'll be applying that to various different scenarios, and how the confusing part is, am I at a shock point because of everything's shocking?
Yeah. Well, for you, Cherie, one of the things that you might want to do is look at the Enneagram of preparing your space for a seminar or a workshop. Because that will give you some concrete stuff, and it can be, I think, very, very useful to plug in the various parts as you go. Maybe you and I will work on that someday in the very, very near future.
I think that would be really helpful, because I think that's where there's one thing to listen to these talks, but then how do I apply it to the very things that I spend most of my time doing? I already look at, in the process of teaching people to stretch, the first thing is to observe what they can do, and then to have a test first. Any exercise they can use as a test, so that when we come around again, we will do that test to see if anything I've told them is BS or not, or where the tension is in the body. And I can see that, okay, I've got a very rudimentary process that's going on all the time, and then to apply the Enneagram to that would be helping to qualify the process that I'm going through. I think that would be really helpful for everybody if we could all learn to do that. That's one thing to say it, but to actually do it is the tough part.
Yeah, I think that it will be interesting if you look at, say, a process of a stretch therapy session with your clients, and you consider that the first shock might be when you invite them to go beyond what they perceive as their limits.
Yeah, that actually, I do.
Yeah. And from there, it's easy to plot the rest of them.
Yep. So you can be that guide center of the Enneagram for.
Yeah, I see you and I
people you
having
work
a bunch of fun work to do with this during our sessions.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
It'd be very, very, very fun. No, great talk.
Excellent.
I would imagine as you practice the Enneagram on basic things that there's as you begin to observe it, there's probably a lot of similarity in the character between the shocks and the various points from one process to another, so that you get more of a, like you said, an intuitive feel for the various stages.
Yeah, and that can look like a lot of different things. You can be walking down the street and for no reason at all, you take 2 steps to your left really quickly, and then a flower pot falls from a 2nd-story window and hits the ground 1 step to your right. And you don't even know why you moved. Or you're walking down the street and you see somebody walking towards you, and you intuit that you're going to cross the street right now so that you don't have to interact with them. Or you're walking down the street, and do a lot of walking down the street, or I used to before the plague, and you see somebody and you know that you have to go up and say something to them. And all of those are a sense of the shock point coming up on processes that you didn't even know that you stepped in sometimes, at least not consciously.
Interesting.
But that's that takes a week or 2. I'm going to come over here and put us back on gallery view so that we can all see each other. And any last thoughts, considerations, compliments, insults, jokes? Anybody want to sing a quick song?
Well, one thing I was thinking about, I might try to pull together an Enneagram of writing a Facebook post.
Oh, yeah.
That would be really interesting and useful to me, because I hate writing Facebook posts.
Get them through those shock points.
Yeah.
I was thinking, okay, there's the work great shock point and the grace shock point, but sometimes the process of making something good, you may be alternating work and grace more than once.
Yeah, and you might be spiraling up a series of Enneagrams that are contained within the major one.
Okay.
Remember, each one of these points has its own Enneagram at a certain level.
Yeah. Yeah, we talked a little bit about that last week too. Yeah.
That could be what's involved with getting stuck when you're not at a shock point, is you've got to sort of go around the little Enneagram for that one point.
Yeah, sometimes. This is why I advocate for learning the Enneagram intuitively, because there's oftentimes too much stuff to keep together consciously. You have the major pattern that you can do consciously. The minor stuff tends to more take care of itself. That's my theory anyway. All right. Well then, I'm going to stop the recording and say good night to everybody out there watching us on YouTube, and hope you all have a good night.
All right. Bye.
Wave.